can kind of give you like a background information that might be of value to understand a little bit more about how all this got started.
Perfect. Go ahead. I would love to hear you and feel you, actually. Yeah, go for
Thank
it.
you. Thank you very much. When I decided to become a yoga teacher and I took my training, I was very clear. I don't want to teach in a yoga studio. I want to bring yoga to people who haven't been exposed to yoga, who can use yoga for their own healing benefit. So that was in 2000. In the year 2000 is when I became certified as a teacher. Went to was a residential treatment facility for boys who had been court ordered into this program. And I proposed to start a yoga program there, which I did.
Hmm.
And then very shortly after that, there was a person who was bringing meditation into juvenile halls. And he contacted me and said, would you be willing to work with us bringing yoga into the juvenile halls? And I said, yes. In 2002, I had a friend who was a therapist who had been going into San Quentin as a volunteer. And the warden at San Quentin had got to know him and asked him, based on your experience, would you start an innovative rehabilitation program? And we knew each other through Spirit Rock Meditation Center, community of us who knew each other through meditation at Spirit Rock. And Jack Cornfield, the main teacher at Spirit Rock, was very intent on Spirit Rock getting somehow involved in bringing services to San Quentin, because San Quentin is only 5 or 6 miles away from Spirit. He was a therapist, started volunteering at San Quentin, and then he started what's called the Insight Prison Project. His vision was to start a program that had four distinct areas of focus: violence prevention, victim offender education, which is mostly on working with offenders on taking personal responsibility for the harm that they've caused. So that all in if a major umbrella of restorative justice, violence prevention, victim offender education, emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, and mind-body integration. So he said, will you join me and work on the mind-body integration and possibly the emotional intelligence part? And I said, absolutely. So I started out as a volunteer. This was 23 years ago, 2002. The program was very well received at San Quentin, and we were able to get funding for the program. And then within 2 or 3 years, what happened was we needed more teachers, more facilitators for the violence prevention program. And then I became trained as a facilitator for violence prevention, working in groups, leading a group for violence prevention, leading a group in restorative justice. And then I helped write the curriculum for the emotional intelligence group. So I had several years of experience, not just teaching yoga every week, but teaching one of these other courses. So I really understood this is what the average incarcerated person is dealing with in terms of, and particularly as it applies to the system, what's needed for their rehabilitation. Reinserción, right? Rehabilitation.
Sí, reinserción. Sí,
Yeah, yeah,
reinserción. There we go.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Reinsertion in all the levels also that you mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, not just thinking, oh, you can do yoga, you can do a yoga practice, and no, you really need to look at what are the issues based on the histories of these people. And I used to say it came down to two things: common denominators, violence and addiction.
Violence and
Violence, whatever it was that you were offering in terms of rehabilitation, if you could address violence or addiction or both, because oftentimes they come together, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I realized, okay, then that's my mission with yoga, is to not just look at it in terms of the way the public looks at yoga, but to look at it really as yoga therapy in a way that would address, and then I even distilled it down even more, that looking at it from violence and addiction, and then thinking, okay, then what's the and also being a man and having grown up in inner cities and understood what young men go through, I said, okay, impulse control. Impulse control, control de los impulsos, ¿no?
Control del piloto
Ajá.
automático, del
Sí,
piloto automático.
sí, piloto automático, exactamente. So I said, well, yoga, if you really concentrated on yoga for impulse control, and the psychologists refer to that as self-regulation. Self-regulation, right?
Which sounds very difficult.
Yeah, right. Everybody has a problem with that. Everybody has to learn, and if you're fortunate, right?
Yes.
If you come from a family where you learn some self-regulation skills, if you were fortunate enough to have an education where you learn self-regulate, but people in prison, the vast majority of those people, they never learn those skills. So then my focus became, okay, whatever I'm doing, whether it's movement, whether it's calming the nervous system, whether it's meditation, which I never called meditation, I always called it centering. Then, as the years went on, began to become exposed to trauma and the whole understanding of trauma, which is, when you really look at it, it maybe 15 years old, maybe 20 years old, right? Maybe 15 years. I mean, Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score. All of a sudden, I realized, oh, well, I've been addressing issues related to trauma, not really understanding this is trauma. This is developmental. This is all the issues that come from childhood trauma, community trauma, racial trauma, all coming together. And then you put these people into a prison, which is a total trauma inducing environment, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So
yes.
then it became more definitive in terms of what is it that we're doing. We're doing trauma informed yoga and embodiment practices for people. And all the trauma experts, all the trauma research, all the trauma therapists understand that in order to address trauma, you have to address the body. You can't just address the mind.
Absolutely. And they say this phrase, out of the body, out of the mind.
Right.
That's why the first foundation of mindfulness is the body. And these people have no connection with the body because the body represents a lot of trauma.
Right. Yeah, mindfulness is truly a body-centered awareness practice, right? You can't anyway. So I'm giving you kind of the whole sort of understanding of the background. A lot of the information that I gave you, understanding the other issues of prisoners, I brought into my book. So I address a lot of the issues that the average person who's incarcerated is dealing with. Yeah.
Healing over punishment. I think that is huge. This is the sphere
Yeah.
that covers everything. It is important that people listen to you, not only from your experience that is huge, but from the impact of not only incarcerated people, but people that is invited to address this in these places. And also remind me of when they ask the Dalai Lama the question. So when you die, when you leave your body, are you going to heaven or to hell? You know this. He says, "I'm going to hell," and then journalist, the person says, "What?" And he says, "Of course, I want to help people with suffering." And when I picture the jail system and when I have seen from the outside working with staff members that work before and during the process of incarceration, I noticed that there is a lot of suffering.
Oh, yeah.
It's hell.
I think healing over punishment was sort of the evolution of our stating our mission, and so that came into being about, if it wasn't last year, it was the year before that. And a lot of it had to do with when we started reaching out to seeing if we could provide services to prison staff, understanding, as you mentioned, that everybody who's involved in the system is suffering. When you look at the statistics, the average correctional officer in the United States, his life expectancy, her life expectancy is 59 years old. This is stated. I got documents, research, all. In fact, there's some great research that's been done on the well-being and the health of correctional officers, and they're terribly traumatized. I mean, suicide, uh, substance abuse, to deal with the vicarious trauma of their jobs. And you've got a situation in terms of the way that a system that's based on punishment is punishing everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody. Whereas if you shift the approach to, all right, you're not it if you look at a scale, if you've got a balance of scale, punishment is here and in our system, and healing is way down here. What we want to do is we want to bring it up, even if we can bring it to here, not to mention to here and then to here. That's what we're looking at. And we know from our experience of bringing the healing practices of yoga and also relationship building in a different way than relationship is built through prison staff, where you're actually working with people and you're trying to engage, you're trying to support agency on their behalf. This is all addressing healing, and we see the results of it. Tried to work with correctional officers who are also known as guards, but they don't like to be called guards.
Okay.
And we got nowhere there. Nowhere. We couldn't get past that green wall of like, oh yeah, well, yoga, forget about it. So we started working with mental health staff. So the mental health staff that provides services to incarcerated people, because we felt that was a much easier sell, right? They get it. What's amazing, Sophia, is how little somatic practices they use. They're still mostly cognitive behavioral approach, mostly, and very little somatic work. We trained PE staff, physical education staff of the British prison system, because they were already, and the British prison system has very good PE programs throughout their prisons, where they're doing football, some prisons they're doing boxing, some prisons are doing track and things like that. And the UK is very, very trauma informed. It's written into Parliament, has written into their understanding that anybody who works in the system, in the UK system of providing services, has to do trauma informed training. It's an understanding that anybody who works in government has to go through trauma informed training.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How far is the United States from that approach?
Oh, no kidding. And they're also Josephine, who's our European director, and I did a presentation 2 years ago at the House of Lords in Parliament. Parliament did a whole study in 2018 on how can mindfulness be applied to different sections of our society. In that regard, we haven't been able to work on the ground level of working with correctional officers and so we're starting where it's easier to do it.
Yes.
So there's a big experiment. I would say it's an experiment. So the governor came to San Quentin in 2023.
The governor of California.
Yeah. He comes to San Quentin often. He announced, I want to turn San Quentin into the model for prisoner rehabilitation in the United States.
Wow.
So San Quentin, of course, like, most institutions and bureaucracies change their name to San Quentin Rehabilitation Center. $360 million from the California State Legislature to build a rehabilitation building at San Quentin. And San Quentin, like a number of the other prisons, has what they call prison industries, where they make different things. And San Quentin had a furniture factory where they made furniture for the rest of the prisons. They had a mattress factory where they make mattresses for the other prisons. So what they did was they tore down this furniture factory, and now they're building this major rehabilitation. So it all makes sense. It's all a great idea. But the problem is it's being addressed from the top down rather than the bottom up. And so, all right, you're going to turn this into this major rehabilitation center. How are you going to do the culture change with staff? Because staff continues on this, we're here to punish these people. So there may be an opportunity at some point in time. If there is any opportunity, it would be at San Quentin. And also, the prison down in San Diego is also a progressive prison. The Donovan prison in San Diego is
Yes.
And particularly one of the units there, one of the yards there, is very progressive. And that's where we've done a lot of work there. Bill Brown has done some incredible work at that yard. But I think this whole idea of healing over punishment is not just for those people who are incarcerated, it's for the whole system. It's for what we want to do is we want to level the playing field so that we're providing trauma-informed somatic tools to everybody. Talk about relationship. I talk about treating people with respect and dignity. That's all I'm talking about. Rather than the punishment approach of, you're a prisoner, I'm only here to teach yoga, I don't care anything else about you. There's no healing possibility there.
Yeah, there is no healing without compassion.
Without passion and without building trust.
Yeah, and the compassion piece is goes both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
The stick has two ends.
Yeah, exactly. Passion begins with empathy. So
Correct.
you have to first learn, and this is something that those other
Mhm.
courses that I taught, the emotional intelligence course, was really focused on basically learning or relearning, but with many of incarcerated people, it's brand new. It's learning empathy. And that begins the process of like really putting yourself into a situation where you could feel what somebody else was going through, then you wouldn't harm them, right? I mean, this is one of the first steps in stopping harm is learning empathy. And then that leads to compassion, um, and making amends, right? If you're in a system where you're just punished, there's no way you're going to learn this. So how can we rehabilitate people? That's why our recidivism rate in the US, recidivism, meaning rearrested and brought back to prison, is 75%
Hmm.
in the United States. So you have 2 million people who are incarcerated, and 75% of them return to prison once they get out
Wow.
because the system is broken. It's based on punishment, and there's not enough focus on rehabilitation. So we provide scholarships to formerly incarcerated people who have been in our program. We
Yes.
want to make sure that they've already worked with us.
Yeah.
And then we've opened it up to communities, marginalized communities. So people because we want to we want to do what we can do to change the face and the look of the kind of people who teach in those communities. You don't want a white person going to an African American community and teaching yoga. It doesn't make any sense.
Creating this environment where people is also available to share this with family members, with because it's about embodiment, right? Embodiment of this practice and trust.